Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing popular books that I did not like. Alright guys, so I try to keep my channel pretty positive. However, I was running out of video ideas, so I asked over on Instagram what kind of content you guys want to see on my channel. And a lot of you came up with all of the books like I DNF last year, popular books that I hate, or an unhaul video. So this video is going to be slightly negative. I also want to say that reading is subjective, and all of the books I'm about to talk about are popular for a reason. So I am not suggesting you guys don't pick these books up. These are probably some of your favorite books. It's just personally, these books didn't work for me. So just know that going in, and if you don't like kind of negative content, I wouldn't watch this video. This is me just roasting some of the books that I did not enjoy. So with all that out of the way, if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Thursday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new Vickish content. You can also check out my Instagram and Goodreads, both linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about all of the popular books I did not enjoy. Alright, so starting off with probably the most controversial series on this list, we have the Cruel Prince series, or the Folk and Heir series by Holly Black. Now, this is 100% a me thing. I know a lot of people and friends of mine who have read this series and really enjoyed it. My issue with this series is I read it right after I read A Court of Thorns and Roses. And the reason I picked it up after ACOTAR is because so many people said that if you love the romance in ACOTAR, you should read the Cruel Prince series. Now, I disagree with that statement. I think that there aren't very many similarities between ACOTAR and the Cruel Prince, besides the fact that they both involve fae, but the fae in both worlds are even like drastically different. And if I read the Folk and Heir series without having ACOTAR in the back of my mind and trying to read a series that was similar, I probably would have enjoyed it more. There were certain aspects that I really liked, like the fact that the fae couldn't lie, so you really had to interpret like the double meaning when they were talking, and the action, and there were parts I really enjoyed. However, the romance in the Folk and Heir series is terrible. I hate it. And I know a lot of people absolutely love Carden and Jude. However, he is horrible to her. And like we find out later, like going through the series, that he did have a pretty horrific childhood, but he's never remorseful for the way he treats Jude. And it didn't feel like a romance to me. I love them as separate characters. It didn't feel fleshed out enough. I wanted more of them together and really connecting with each other. And I just didn't get that. And I hated the third book so much. Like that is one of those books that has actually made me angry while reading it. I hated the ending. I didn't pick up her newest release, whatever that was. But yes, that is a series that I know so many people love. And I get a little angry when I think about it. Alright guys, so I just realized for the next 3 books I am going to have to go into spoilers just because it's really hard to describe why I dislike these books without going into the ending of the books, which are like huge spoilers. So I will have a spoiler warning on the screen anytime I'm discussing a spoiler, and I will also have it linked down in the timestamps below. So if you want to skip to the books that don't have any spoiler warnings, definitely do that. So first up, we have Requiem by Callie, Hart. I have been so excited to read this book. It was finally available via audio, and I just couldn't wait. So this was pitched as like a high school romance where our main character's best friend is killed in this drunk driving accident. So now she wants to get revenge on the guy that I believe was driving the car or like hit the car. And it's her story. So she's going into this like prep school, and she's gonna try to either like bring him down or I think even kill him. Whatever. So that's the premise of this story. So now let's get into spoilers. Spoilers! So we find out very quickly that things are amiss. It seems like people know her. It seems like the love interest in this book knows her very well, the main character. So, turns out this is an amnesia romance. I hate amnesia romances with a burning passion. I don't know what it is about them. This book just felt so unbelievable, the way that these things had to work out together. It's not feasible. This book isn't feasible, what happens in this book. So we learn that our main character actually suffered amnesia when she was in this accident with her boyfriend. So now her boyfriend is pretty much playing the Notebook and is making her fall in love with him every time she like loses her memory. And then we find out they're all in this prep school. Really, the boy graduated already. They're actually in their 20s, although the main character thinks she's like 18. And he's just trying to like make her remember her past, which like hasn't been working out. And it was just bizarre. And then we find out towards the end of the book, there's actually this corrective surgery that can be done to get her memories back. And the main guy is like, I don't want you to do that though. Like, we can have a future together. And it was beautiful. Parts of the romance were beautiful, but I just couldn't get past the fact that none of this would actually like happen. And I understand, like, it doesn't have to be like accurate. Like, these things don't actually have to come to pass. I read a ton of fantasy romance. Something about this just irritated me, especially when the main character decides that she's gonna sneak out in the middle of the night and get this very risky brain surgery. And somehow there's just a room waiting for her to do this. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And I hated it. I hated it so much. This is probably going to be my least favorite book of the year. And you're probably going to ask, why on Goodreads did I rate this 2 stars? And that is because I finished it. So I was interested enough in the story to actually complete it. I didn't DNF it. And it kept me hooked. Like, I read it in a day and a half. It was just as soon as I finished it, I was like, wow, I did not enjoy that book. So anyway, I am so sorry if this is one of your favorite books. I know a lot of my friends really enjoyed it. Personally, this just did not work for me. Next up, we have Perfect Strangers by J.T. Geissinger. So I don't remember a lot of this book, honestly. I read this book in one sitting after I had multiple people tell me that they absolutely loved it and the twist was like crazy and all this other stuff. So I'm pretty sure it's this woman that she goes on vacation where she meets this stranger and they have this like brief affair and maybe they like only give each other their names or something. I don't know. And then it kind of turns into like an action movie where this guy is actually like a hitman or something. Anyway, huge spoiler. It turns out all of this is actually just going on in her head. We find out a tragedy took place and like she's been in this mental institution and you're like, wow, that's crazy. Did not see that coming. And I would have been fine if we had ended it there, but then there's another twist at the very end of the book where we find out all of this is actually a story that is being written by a writer, and the writer, like, created these characters, like, it was her husband. Like, she was referencing her husband in, like, all of the different stories, and it was just, I didn't need that extra epilogue. Like, had it ended where she wakes up and she's like, oh my god, all of this was like a figment of my mind, none of this really happened, that would have been cool. But the fact then to find out that none of this actually happened, it was just this woman that was writing a book, that just, I didn't love it. So I think I rated it like 2 stars. There's another book on this list that the ending made me even more mad, so it's not the worst ending, but still, I was not a fan. And this next book is another one that is very much beloved, and I honestly would have rated it 5 stars had it not been for the ending. So this will contain spoilers. It is 1,000 Boy Kisses by Tille. So had I not read the epilogue of this book, 5-star read. Easy. I cried so much in this book. It was so emotional. It really shows you like teenage love and then heartbreak. So if you're unfamiliar with the story, we are following Poppy, and she is best friends with this boy that moved over, I'm pretty sure from Sweden. They meet when they're children, and they just have this like really close connection right off the bat. They grow up together, it blossoms into a romance, and they're just inseparable. He calls her Poppy Mean. It's like her cute little nickname, and they're just the best. And then something happens, and the boy, I forget his name now, he has to go back to Sweden. So he's obviously very upset about this, but he makes Poppy promise that she will call him like every night. They're going to stay in contact and eventually they will be together again. So that all works out fine for about a year. And then Poppy just goes radio silent. And the guy, her best friend, is just so upset by this and he feels betrayed and he feels like he lost his best friend. So he kind of goes down like a dark hole. He starts smoking cigarettes, wearing like goth makeup, doesn't listen to his parents. And they eventually move him back to the United States. And when he gets there, he is ready to confront Poppy about what happened. And we find out Poppy is actually dying of cancer. And we wanted to stop, or Poppy didn't want her best friend and her boyfriend at this time to know about it and just be worried about it because he's all the way in Sweden. So it's like their last year together. And oh my god, it is crushing. She wants to get 1,000 boy kisses because that's something that her grandmother had told her is like something you should do in your life. So like she's collecting kisses from him and it's so beautiful. Then we get to the epilogue. So I was wondering the entire time I was reading this, I'm like, does she not die of cancer? Because this is a romance and it has to have a happily ever after. Then she died and I was like, oh my god, this was not a romance, but it was still beautiful. I love this story. And maybe the happily ever after was like he lives in peace without her, but like they did have that romance together. No, the epilogue is the guy dying like 10 years later and then being together in heaven, which is beautiful. However, I didn't need it. I did not need them together watching, like, I think he also kind of dies tragically. Like, he's pretty young when he dies. And it's just unnecessary. I did not need it. It just really took me out of the story, and I hated it. So overall, without the epilogue, 5 stars. With the epilogue, like 1.5. All right, this next series, if you're familiar with my channel, you already know I did not enjoy this series. I read this as part of a reading vlog with a bunch of other romance booktubers where we all got together and we read it and vlogged our journey, and that is the Crossfire series. So I made it to book 3.5. I think I got halfway to the 4th book, and then I was like, I'm done. I can't read this book anymore. So if you would like to see my entire vlog, I will leave it linked in the cards and in the description. It is really just me ranting after the first like 10 minutes. But in fairness to this series, if I read this when this series first released, I probably would have ate it up. The issue is this was released a while ago, and the writing really reflects that. The sex scenes are just very crude, very blunt, and it's awkward, and it's just, I could not get into it. It was like 50 Shades of Grey, but like so much more angsty, and that's actually, if you describe it that way, that sounds pretty good, but it's not, trust me. It was just billionaire crazy romance, and I could not get into it. But yeah, like I said, if you want to see that vlog, I'll leave it linked in the cards in the description. Just not for me. And this next book is actually by an author that I really love their works. This is probably one of the only books I have not enjoyed by them, and that is Verity by Colleen Hoover. So I love most Colleen Hoover books. It Ends With Us being my absolute favorite, and then also Maybe Someday and Heartbones. Her romances just really pull at the heartstrings, and they're just so emotional. So I decided to try out her thrillers. Now, prior to starting to read romance, I only read historical fiction and thrillers. I was a huge fan of thrillers. It was one of my favorite genres. So when I picked up Verity, I was super excited. I could tell right away I was probably not gonna like this book. I feel like the beginning of it, it's a very like upsetting scene happens to like start it off. And then from there, it feels like it is purposely trying to make you uncomfortable, and also just unnecessary like violence, if that makes any sense. I'm trying to keep this part spoiler free because I know I already did a lot of spoilers earlier. But it just felt unnecessary, and like I called the big twist at the end right away, and I was really hoping that wasn't the twist. It was just, there was nothing about that book I enjoyed. I feel like it was just upsetting to be upsetting. And the thrilling aspects of the book just weren't that exciting or interesting. So I have yet to read any of her other thrillers. I feel like she's just not an author that I'm going to enjoy her more like suspenseful works, but I will continue to read her romances. And next up is more of like a taboo romance, and that is Priest by Sierra Simone. So first off, this has a lot to do with just me in general. I myself am not super religious. However, I am from Irish and Latin descent, so my family is very Catholic, and I grew up going to church and like doing all of those things. And the entire time I was reading this book, I was just thinking about my grandma in heaven being like, what are you doing? So I just couldn't get past that guilt while reading it. However, I have read other priest romance, and I have really enjoyed them for the most part. Still kind of feels weird when I'm reading them. Me and Sierra Simone's writing, we just don't jive. I don't know what it is about their writing. I end up rating all of their books really low. I can't even really pinpoint what it is, because it's not that the writing is necessarily like bad or overly simple, simplistic. It's just something about it I hate. I've read novellas by this author. I tried the American Royalty series. I didn't even finish the first book, and then I read 2 books in the Priest series, Priest and Sinner, and I disliked all of them. So I have just given up on reading Sierra Simone. However, I know a lot of people that really, really enjoy Priest and Sinner in that whole series. So if you're interested in a Priest romance, I would definitely give that a try. I think it's probably one of the best known. And last up is another book that is 100% a me thing, and that is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I have tried to read that book at least 4 times. I have DNF'd it every time, very early in, and it has nothing to do with the writing or the characters. I don't think I've ever gotten far enough to really even appreciate the romance. It's just the fact that I hate office romances. So I tried to read an Emily Henry book that also kind of featured, it wasn't an office romance, but it had like that kind of vibe. I just don't like reading about work while I'm reading. So I use reading as like a form of escapism. So I don't want to hear about this person like sending an email to corporate while flirting with a guy that's like across the cubicle. I want just fantasy romance or just not a workplace setting. And anytime I read a book that it takes place in the workplace or they're mentioning the workplace, it gives me anxiety. So yeah, I never finished The Hating Game. I have heard that it was adapted into a movie. I'm not exactly sure. I've heard kind of negative things about the movie, but yeah, there's definitely people out there that really enjoy it. At this point, I have just given up. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. Those were all the popular books that I did not enjoy. And once again, reading is subjective, so if one of your favorite books was on this list, I am really sorry. I'm happy that you guys loved it. They just personally didn't work for me. Please let me know down in the comments below what is your least favorite popular book. And I said this already, I post new videos every Thursday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye!